You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike Tusaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. The Option Block is brought to you by Tasty Trade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? Tasty Trade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. Tasty Trade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. It is Monday. It is time to commence operations here with another full broadcast week on the old Options Insider Radio Network. How do we kick that off? Of course, with your bi-weekly options extravaganza, known around the globe as the Option Block. As we kick off the week, as always, three important things to remind you of. First off, listen to the full network. If you're not, you're missing out on a whole freaking boatload of content, to be technical. Second, of course, if you like what you hear, throw some stars, a like, a comment, whatever your platform lets you do. All of it in aggregate does help new people continue to discover the content. We all know there's new people discovering it all the time. Maybe you're going to your local barber shop or something else, and you hear someone talking about options you maybe never would have heard before, or a friend or a buddy asked you about it at a party over the weekend. They're out there. The people are all out there. So help them out. Throw a like, a star, a comment. Does help them find their way to this content. And of course, if you, the discerning listener that you are, if you need a little bit more options content in your life, and who doesn't, including some great pro Q&A sessions, options oddities at the end of the week where we really get up to some mischief and all sorts of fun. Only one place to go. Actually, coming up on it, man, it's already almost Halloween. It means we have to give away the October Pro trading grade soon. So, man, I'm just giving away stuff left, right, and center. Get your hands on some of that stuff. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more about all that fun. As we learn who's joining us today on the old OB, of course, we've got the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com, as well as the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike Tusaw from St. Charles Wealth Management. I introduce them now, listeners, because it is that time. We have to commence our broadcast week in high style with a little bit of the old 80s wrestling trivia. All right, everybody, let's do it. Let us commence the guessing game right and proper. Today's wrestler is an interesting one. You know, I was looking over some of the data about him. In general, this person, we'll start you off vague, and then we'll get a little bit more specific. Let's see if Uncle Mike wants to buzz in now. Haha. He started off his pro career, actually playing professional football. He played a couple of years of preseason mostly for the Raiders and the Cowboys, so wasn't really a football star. Then he went up to the Great White North, where he began to learn the dark art of pro wrestling. And at one point, he went to the Calgary Stampede, where he won the anvil toss, throwing it 11 feet 2 inches. There we go. The Meatball. If you didn't buzz in on that one, I would be shocked. Mr. Meatball, who could possibly have won the anvil toss in the Calgary Stampede, sir?
I'm going to say it's Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
Yes, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, one half of probably my second favorite tag team of the 80s. Obviously, everyone knows I'm a Demolition guy. But right behind him, the Pink and Black Attack, Bret Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. They were 80s pro wrestling at its finest. You had the slick guy, and then you had, of course, the bruiser. And that was Jim the Anvil. He actually went to learn from Bret's dad, Stu Hart, married one of his daughters, so he really kind of married into the family. And then, of course, he passed away actually a little over 5 years ago now, which is crazy. It was August of 2018. I do believe his passing, we started talking about 80s wrestling, was one of the catalysts for the creation of this segment. So maybe a few months, maybe a year later, we started talking about, how many 80s wrestlers, and Jim the Anvil just died. And so he, in some way, is to blame. If you hate this segment, if most of you love it, so for those of you who love it, you can thank another legacy of one James the Anvil Neidhart. As we keep on rolling, listeners, right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block, the portion of the show where we see what's lighting up the tape out there and see what's moving these markets. And you know what? It seems like the concerns that were weighing on the market last week are now in the rearview mirror, at least for the time being. We all know this market can turn on a dime. But right now, we are back in the Uncle Mike phase with the S&P up nearly 0.75%, NASDAQ up about 0.2%, and a rare moment where the Dow is leading the charge, up nearly 1.2%. Of course, we got Fed on the horizon, so you might think folks would be keeping their powder dry heading into that, but not today. They are buying up all the stocks they can get their hands on. That means our vol friends are mostly lighter than they were on the Thursday show. VIX, when we kicked off the show, a little bit shy of 20.5, about 20.40. It's down about 1 1/3 points from where it was on Thursday. VVIX back below 100, just slightly, down to about a 98, puts it down 7 handles from the Thursday show. VXX 2560 down a little over 1, about 1.15 points. UVXY 1830 down exactly a point. SVIX 2385 up nearly a full point, about 0.85. And our old friend UVIX at about a 40 exactly when we kicked off the show. It puts it down a little over 3 points. Of course, if you know UVIX, if I re-rack it right now, it's probably at a 26. Who knows? The thing moves at just a lightning pace. It's ridiculous. All right, let's go around the horn. Mr. Meatball, you are our winner, so you get to go first. Before we even get to today's market fund, sir, what are some of your enduring memories of one Jim the Anvil Neidhart, sir?
Yeah, well, after Bret went off on his own, he ended up pairing with Owen for a while. And then, was never able to kind of pull it together as his own kind of singular wrestler. He always needed to be a part of a team. That was the way it worked. But I believe he was hilariously one of the Survivor Series. They did Team Canada versus Team United States, and there was one person from Canada on Team Canada. Everyone else had some association with Canada, but was actually American. And then on the American side, it was all Americans. The Canadian side was, I believe, Owen Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and a couple other guys. Jim the Anvil Neidhart is American. And then I don't remember who was on Team USA, but, kind of hilarious that it was Team Canada versus Team USA, and literally everyone was from the United States.
As it should be.
Bulldog was on Team Canada.
As it should. Yeah, Bulldog. I love that. He married in too, though. So he's one of those marry-in guys, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Many of them were, in fact, had associations with Canada.
Canadian brothers-in-law.
Yes. But really, very, very non-Canadian on Team Canada.
Interesting stuff. And what's catching your eye out there in yet another Uncle Mike type of day, sir?
It was a lot more Uncle Mike on the open. We've been kind of threatening to fall apart and then threatening to take off. We've been kind of stuck in a relatively tight range all day. Vol is coming off after getting really spicy on Friday, as you'll recall. The Dow is, in fact, the leader. We've got strength in a lot of different businesses, but it's getting helped by Deere, which is up a lot and weighs heavily in the Dow. Microsoft, it's getting help from, let me take a look at UNH, I believe, is the biggest. Goldman's having a great day, so that's helping it. And United Healthcare is up as well. So all the high dollar stocks that are rallying are giving the Dow a nice boost. The laggard, interestingly, is the S&P, is the NASDAQ 100 for the second day in a row. Or no, not the second day. It was up on Monday. It was the only index that managed to close in the green on Friday. But how about Tesla falling back below $200 a share? That I think is kind of interesting. And a lot of weakness in gambling stocks. Basically, they're kind of taking energy, and companies that don't make money are kind of the big losers for the day. And you've got some strength in industrials.
Intriguing stuff. We always talk about the old world economy Dow, but it has some flavors. Interestingly enough, because it has Microsoft and not Alphabet, it's probably why it's up right now. So again, picking winners in the AI wars, listeners, all sorts of fun. Uncle Mike had a ringside seat for the Monday Night Wars, even though I think he was probably less of a wrestling fan by that. That was post Jim the Anvil era. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what are your enduring memories of one Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Canadian by marriage? And then what's catching your eye in the markets today?
Well, I mean, with Jim the Anvil Neidhart, he never really did make it on his own. He was always part of the Hart Foundation, and I couldn't even remember him wrestling in a singles match ever. I remember a ton of matches with the Hart Foundation, but just in all of my memories, I know he did.
He would do some singles stuff to job for guys they were trying to push, because one of the nice things about being a good tag teamer is you could lose a singles match, and it didn't, it didn't really hurt your rep the way it would an individual wrestler. So I believe he did do a lot of jobs on the singles side. Never any success, though. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really remember a lot of it. It was funny when you were asking the question. I got so caught up in trying to figure out who played for the Raiders and the Cowboys.
I knew that would consume you. I knew that would.
I'm like, not that person. Then I heard you say Anvil, and then right as I was getting ready to hit the buzz button, Sebastian beat me.
I knew that would be a little bit of a distraction if I threw that out there first, see who would bite on it. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that one got my mind going the opposite way, so that was good. But anyway, so in terms of the market today, we're having we're not as high as we were by any means, but we're definitely higher. And I think that I believe what is kind of helping us stay adrift, so to speak, right now, or the main thing that's keeping us adrift is that if you look at just a chart from Friday, the price bar from Friday, we held 4,100. And so that does to me look like a pretty key level that there's a lot of activity at the 4,100 level in the S&P, and that it was a point of resistance in around a year ago. It was a little bit of a point of resistance in not necessarily. It was kind of an area of consolidation, I would say, in February. It was a magnet number for April, May, and a little bit of early June. And now here we are. It's acting kind of as a support level again. And so from there, buyers came in. 4,100 was respected. If we do go below 4,100, 4,000, of course, it's a key number, or it's a big round number. That could act as another level of support. But for right now, 4,100 seems to be enough strength of what the market itself desires. In terms of the sectors, just to kind of just to kind of go over what Mark was saying, for the most part, the only thing that's really dragging us down, if you will, or that's negative on the day, a little bit with energy, and that's about it in the sectors for anything that's negative right now. Nothing's really going up to the moon, so to speak, but nothing's going down from a sector standpoint, so can't really complain there. In terms of some of the individual names, Amazon on my screen anyway, or some of the things that I follow, I should say, Amazon's up over $3.50 on the day. So for the Amazonians out there, that's always a good thing. McDonald's, that's up over $4 on the day. And I guess if they're going to, from what I was understanding with their announcement, they raised prices a little bit, and that kind of saved them in terms of getting more revenue. So it's the old economic adage, buyers seek a lower price, but on the business side of it, sellers seek a higher price. And so there, McDonald's actually raising prices, it benefited them. So kudos to Mickey D's for helping their shareholders with a price increase. Last but not least, we still are kind of sticking around that. We're not quite at the 5% level on the 10-year note, but we're still like right around it. And it's almost like the 5% area is where it wants to be right now, or in that area. So we'll see if we can stay around that area in 10-year note land. So a quick update in terms of what I've been doing with a lot of my bond holdings. I'm very short term right now with the vast majority of my higher net worth clients. And just in case the Fed decides to say, hey, we should start lowering rates right now, we're going to lower rates, which I think they should say, but that's just my opinion. I do have some calls on a little bit more higher volatile bond holding as well, and that's how I'm playing it at this stage. So that is what's lighting up the tape in Uncle Mike land.
In Uncle Mike land, indeed. Let's roll on out to options land, see what's lighting it up out there. By the way, before we get there really quickly, I forgot to mention, I do believe Jim the Anvil, now in the WWE Hall of Fame, inducted, I believe, after his death as part of the Hart Foundation went in as a tag team. So he went in for that, so the Pink and Black attack. In fact, I do believe that was the night that Bret Hart was attacked, giving the address about Jim the Anvil and accepting on his behalf that random person attacked him. An indie wrestler, I think. So look it up on YouTube if you're not familiar, listeners. But crazy times out there. A lot of wrestlers, let's just say, we're not down with somebody attacking Bret the Hitman. They messed that guy up pretty good. So, interesting times out there. Interesting times in the market as well. Although you wouldn't know it from VIX land, listeners. VIX right now kind of looking sleepy. You would never think, a weekend coming after a crazy week, maybe starting to get some upside back, maybe getting a little bit of paper, a little bit of action in VIX land. The answer is no. We are starting to get maybe a little bit of that whipsaw, so I think that might turn VIX a little bit in terms of just volume, but no, exactly 200,000 contracts on the tape right now. When you see our ADV is still 905,000 contracts, you can see VIX has a long way to go today. Doesn't seem like we're going to get there today. I got a sneaking feeling by the Thursday show, let alone the Friday episode of All Views, that ADV is probably going to be a little bit lighter. But you never know. We got a Fed coming up this week, so that usually tends to gin up things in the volume department for VIX. SPY, 5.1 million, so SPY looking pretty robust, all things considered. The ADV right around 9.5 million right now in SPY land. The S, 1.8 million, so the S not slowing down for anybody today either. The ADV about 3.5 million in the S now. Man, that still sounds crazy every time I say it. Small caps, IWM. We didn't pull up small caps today. They've been a weird laggard of late, listeners. They were rallying when everything else was selling off, and they were struggling not to sell off when everything else was it was a weird time last week for small caps. And they're still up right now, up about not even 0.25%, a little bit less, listeners. So they are up. They were up firmer this morning, and now looks like giving up a good chunk of that. I like the rest of the market as well. So another day where the small caps are moving in lockstep after last week kind of bucking things a little bit. 604,000 contracts on the tape for small caps. The ADV, 1.6 million out there. And the Qs, about 2.5, almost 2.55 million out there. The ADV, 4 and about 1/3 million. So the Q's putting up some numbers these days. It was hanging out around 3 million forever. Now it's already almost at that right now. Let's get out to the single names. Let's see if it's a day that single name kind of forgotten. The answer is kind of yeah. And also, this looks like just a pretty much traditional reshuffling of the deck here, listeners. I see one name maybe 2 if you want to stretch, that don't normally pop up in our usual suspects list of top 10 frequent offenders. The rest, all of our usual suspects out here, including number 10, the chip zone coming a little early today. Only cost you 173,000 contracts to break into the top 10. So that shows you it's not exactly a banger day on the single name front. If this turnaround continues, maybe we get dark side, maybe that'll change. But right now, not the case. Number 10, AMD, 173,000. AMD off about $1.25, trading a little bit north of 95, about 95.15 right now. Got as high as a little over 97 earlier this morning, so that seemed like that was pretty short-lived. They gave that up pretty quickly. So they flirted with 97 and now have crushed it back down to almost 95. And good for the number 10 spot. Number 9, it's Alphabet. 198,000 contracts on the tape for them. They're still up about 210 right now, trading 124 and about a quarter. They got as high as almost 125 and a quarter. So they've given up about $1 from the highs, but they're also off their lows of about 120 and a half. So interesting stuff out there for, I almost said Microsoft. That's number 8. Spoiler. Number 9, good old Alphabet. The AI war is coming fast and furious in our top 10 today, listeners. Number 8, I already gave it away. It's good old Softy. 334, almost 335, 334.95 or so. Up about $5 and change, 513. So getting back a lot of what it gave up last week. It was a weird week for Microsoft last week. Everybody loved it post earnings. Then they came for it almost immediately. Very weird to watch the turnaround out there. But they had 24 hours of optimism. And of course, they did finally close this Activision deal. So interesting to see what that means. Gaming now very much a pillar for Microsoft going forward, where in the past it was kind of a bit of an also-ran. They have acquired half of the studios now, it seems like, in the gaming world. So whether they like it or not, they're a big player. So interesting stuff out there. Got up to about 330, actually looks like 339 and about a half. Wow, that's pretty high for them. 336.18 is where they're hanging out right now. So they shot it up early and they kind of gave it back up to right around where it is right now. And it's kind of been bouncing around this 335, 336 range. The rest of the morning, again, good for number 8, 209,000 contracts. Number 7, it's Meta, 302 3/4, up about $6 right now, a little over 2%. So a nice pop for them. They got as high as about 309 and a half this morning. That's a huge run. 303.60 is where they're hanging out right now. So they've given up a lot of that upside, listeners. Intriguing stuff, but off their low also of 299.05. So they've had a little over $10 range on the day. That's a pretty banger day for the artist formerly known as Facebook. Number 6, this is one of the few sneaking in there that we don't normally see. We were talking about it a lot on Options Oddities with our buddy, the options guy, on Friday for all you pro folks. This is Ford. Ford coming back on the highlights of all, and on the heels, of course, of this big strike, and then their deal with the strikers, and now taking a hit back below the 10 handle again. $9.86 is where Ford is hanging out, off about 11 cents today. If you've been following Ford, you know it's kind of been a bit of a saga. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. We were joking about it on shows like Options Oddities, even a little bit here, but a lot of it on Options Oddities of people piling in back in the heady days of 2021, loading up on the 25s and the 30s and 25-30 verticals. And so much paper went to die on that upside back when people thought Ford was a meme stock, listeners, because they had that stake in Rivian. And so people were just loading up. And even at the time, we thought this might be a bit of a bridge too far for Ford. Unfortunately, it was, and back down we go. This year, it got a high of about $15.50. That was back in July, and right now, below $10. Brian was joking that we had that poll last week about what is your cutoff for selling cheap options, and he said to me for years, his cutoff is wherever Ford is trading. So it's right around $10 right now, so that's a good level for where your cutoff is. It's Ford, $10 and change, or right now $9.86. Number 6, 301,000 contracts. This is a bit of a weird one. Number 5, listeners. Yes, I said number 5. It's the fruit company. Only 349,000. That is a rounding error for Apple. We'll see that some days, just going up in these crazy paloozas that go up in the weekly calls. We talked about those in the past in Apple today. Total of 349,000 contracts. That is a whole heck of a lot of nothing. Trading 169 and about 3/4 right now, up about $1.50. They got as high as 171 earlier in the session before giving that back, so back below 170 right now. And again, heck of a lot of nothing. 349 on the tape for number 5. Number 4 is the other sneaker inner, if you will. This is SoFi. We've been talking about them a little bit of late. They've been moving a bit, not a ton today. 6 3/4 is where they're hanging out right now, off about a dime. like they've had a little bit of a wider range, 668 on the dark side, 788 on the upside. So a $1.20 range out there for SoFi, which for SoFi is certainly not nothing. But again, the options paper 366, that's usually not enough to really make a dent. But today is all the way to get you to number 4. Shows you what a sleepy day it is for SoFi out there. They had results, obviously, on the earnings front. So that's what's driving all of this paper. Number 3, listeners, it's NVIDIA, tip of the AI spear, 405.88 right now, up 88 cents. They got as high as 422.82 this morning, and the low was 404.81. My goodness, $18.01 range. That is not something to sleep on here. NVIDIA right now, 516,000. And the number 3 spot, number 2, Uncle Mike was just talking about them. They're the Amazonians, 131.42 right now, up about 370. So a nice little pop for them. They've had a range of 127.63 on the dark side and 133.47 on the upside. So that's actually a pretty impressive range for Amazon. They move, but usually not to that degree out there. Number 2 today, 537,000 contracts. So you know what's number 1? Do I really need to tell you, listeners? It's Tesla. Actually doing fairly impressive volume for them this time of day, even with everything else kind of being sleepy. Usually this time of day, they're around 1.2, maybe 1.3 million. 1.6 million contracts on the tape right now for Tesla. The meatball just alluded to, back below the 200 level. Now, of course, if you go back, they are also well above the pretty much 101 level they hit back when everyone was writing all those headlines saying, oh my God, Tesla is done. It's back at the lowest level it's been in years, about to break 100 to the dark side. This is the end of the EV space. Of course, since then, it just shot up like a rocket back up. Although, what was the high for the year? The high was $299 back in July. So yeah, they're about a little over $100 below that. 196.62 right now, off 10.68 right now. But of course, on the year, they've also been about $100 lower, pretty darn close to it. 101.81 is the low. So they're kind of right smack dab in the middle of that range. So if you believe the past is prologue, then they could potentially have another $100 of downside to go. That would be interesting. That would certainly be a lot of hand-wringing, a lot of dire headlines like we saw last time. But intriguing stuff. Speaking of intriguing stuff, listeners, man, we got a stacked week for earnings this week. Uncle Mike mentioned McDonald's this morning before the bell. We also had SoFi before the bell. Everyone's favorite, Pinterest, out there. Tomorrow we got Pfizer, Caterpillar, JetBlue, Match Group. They pretty much own all of online love, it seems like these days. So if you want a little online love, Match is the place to go. They're popping off tomorrow. Wednesday, CVS, Roku. Used to be a big frequent offender on the most actives. Haven't seen them up there, though, in ages. Qualcomm, Etsy, and DoorDash, and EA. Thursday, Palantir, another name on the AI vanguard there. Shopify, Lilly, Moderna, Crocs, a little fruit company you may have heard of. DraftKings, Starbucks, Coinbase, Duke Energy, a.k.a. the Duck. Oh, and Portillo's, too. So a banger day on Thursday. Friday, a little company you may have heard of called Cibo and Cinemark. Let's look at a couple of things that are popping off this morning. Let's go out to Mickey D's. They were before the bell today. Uncle Mike just loving the price increase out there. I'm still getting over the fact that they got rid of 24-hour breakfast. That killed any McDonald's interest for me after that. There was morning before the bell. 255 3/4 is where they were trading. They were pricing in about 3%. They delivered about 1.3%, so they were pretty much about halfway to their straddle. Looks like as the day has gone on, they've caught up a little bit more. They're up about 2.25%, so they're closing in on that straddle. We shall see. Not usually a banger name out there. Good old Mickey D's. Let's go out here really quick to see if any other names are popping off this morning that are worth getting into. Western Digital, not too exciting unless you're really into hard drives. They're pricing in 6.5%. They delivered about 6%, so nothing too exciting there. Halloween earnings, what we got coming up, listeners? We've got BP and Caterpillar tomorrow. BP before the bell, they were pricing in, they're trading about $38.64. They're pricing in $1.78. In the past, they moved to $1.57. Caterpillar tomorrow before the bell, $238.5. They're pricing in nearly $12, $11.81. In the past, they've moved $9.06. So that's a heck of a lot of extra juice out there in Caterpillar. My goodness. Let's keep on rolling. We've been saying for a while, it seems like a lot of names are leaning to the more juice rather than the latter. Let's see if that trend is continuing. Let's go out to Match Group. Pretty much all of online love. 31st after the bell, $34 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $2.82. In the past, they moved to $1.87. So nearly a full dollar's worth of extra juice in Match Group as well. So yes, the trend does continue, listeners. Wow, that's a lot of juice for Matt. Let's keep rolling. Let's go out to CVS before the bell on the 1st. We're all in candy comas on the morning of the 1st, listeners, and we're also going to enjoy our CVS earnings. 66 and a quarter is where they were trading. They were at 379 on the straddle. In the past, they moved 293. So, yeah, spoiler alert, extra juice for CVS as well. I'm starting to see a trend here, listeners. Airbnb there on the 1st after the bell, 114, pretty much even is where they were trading. They were pricing in 9 3/4. In the past, they moved $8.50. $1.25 worth of extra juice in Airbnb as well. My goodness. It's a lot of juice. DoorDash, talked about them a few times now recently, on oddities definitely, maybe on the odd block as well. I'll have to go check. But they're on the 1st after the bell. 70.65 is where they were trading. They're pricing in, get this, listeners, $6.56. In the past, they moved $4.42. My goodness, fully $2. $2.14 worth of extra juice for DoorDash. My goodness. Even gaming, November 1st after the bell, EA, 122.63. They're at 586 in their straddle. In the past, they've moved about $5, so nearly a full dollar for them as well. My goodness. Roku, 1st after the bell, 56 and a third. They're at 710 for their straddle. In the past, they moved about 6 and a quarter. So spoiler alert, more juice there. Looks like Qualcomm, maybe one of the few names bucking the trend. 106 and a half. They're on the 1st after the bell as well. They were at 7 a quarter in the straddle. In the past, they moved 762. So there are some names pricing in lighter juice, just not many. Let's go out to rubber shoe fame. You know, where rubber shoes go, the market follows, right? That old adage. 2nd before the bell, $86 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $8.84. In the past, they moved $8.50. So more juice, not quite as much as some of the other names, but still leaning on the more juice front. Let's go to the Duke, a.k.a. the Duck, Duke Energy, the 2nd before the bell, 87.5. I'm waiting for someone to write in saying, why do you call Duke Energy the Duck? But $2.99 is what they're so $3 for the straddle, listeners. In the past, they moved less than $1.50, $1.47. So they're pricing in a 2-banger on the Duck there for the straddle. My goodness. You seen the trend here, listeners? I certainly am. Let's go to Moderna, 2nd before the bell, $72 is where they were trading. They were at almost $7 for their straddle, $6.81. In the past, they've moved $4.72. So yeah, spoiler alert, they're pricing in a whole freaking ton of juice. Okay, here's the one that matters. Portillo, 2nd before the bell, about $15 is where they were trading when we ran this report. They're pricing in almost $1.20. In the past, they moved 91 cents. So leaning towards more juice in Portillo's land. I know I like my Italian beef with a little bit of extra juice, so maybe that's what they're going for there. Starbucks, 2nd before the bell, 92 even is where they were trading. $5.10 is what they were pricing in on their straddle. In the past, they've moved $4.49. So yes, extra juice. We could keep going on here, listeners, but extra juice is the order of the day. My goodness. And it's borne out right now. The season is hanging out right now with 276 names reporting. 133%. My goodness. That is some serious outperformance. Oh, you know what? Here, we got a couple more here. We're producers adding them in last. I thought we were missing some here. Let's go out to some names you may have heard of, like Apple, the fruit company, 2nd after the bell. Let's see if they're keeping the trend alive, listeners. 168.22 when we ran this report earlier this morning. They were pricing in about 6 3/4 on their straddle. In the past, they've moved $6.39. So the answer for Apple is yes, more juice. Not quite an explosive amount, but still a decent amount. Let's go out to DraftKings, too, 2nd after the bell. 26.64. They were at $3 exactly in their straddle. In the past, they've moved $2.80. So they're a little bit more juice, a sprinkling, a dab, if you will. The season, though, just bonkers, explosive. 133% right now. That's obviously going to have to come in. But unless all these names keep performing the way they are and pricing in the way they are, then maybe not. But I would expect that to come in. Our long-term average is at 100%. If you want to see all that data for yourselves, listeners, we got to get going. I've been gassing on here, but we're having fun. Time to have more fun, though. It is time for the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, let's get weird. Let's get wild, maybe even whimsical. Before I do that, I've been talking for a bit. Mr. Meatball, we have some data we found out here and some fun Eye of Saurons. But I know you come armed occasionally with some interesting nuggets that have come across your radar as well. Any names you want to dive into before we unleash the beast, sir?
Yeah, I got a couple. I don't know if you saw what's going on in Toast.
Yes,
but
that is our first one here, Toasting.
All right, what about ETRN?
No ETRNs. We can go there if you like.
All right, ETRN, this is Equitrans Midstream. Big buyer of the November 9 calls. They paid 13 cents on about 15,000 of them. This company has earnings tomorrow morning, and we've seen the vol start to creep up a little bit here. Stock is down after, they got a nice dividend coming up on the 15th, so one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, this is one we talked about in the past quite a few times. It's been a few months. Not a name immediately leaps to mind for me when I'm saying I want to buy a ton of near-dated upside. But that's kind of a trend lately. I think Andrew and I were joking about that on Oddities not too long ago. About people are buying now some nearer-dated flyers and names that you wouldn't necessarily expect. The fact that Equitrans also has a dividend coming up doesn't scream you want to go out and buy some calls. But apparently this person was not deterred. 16,000 of them, of the 9s in November, listeners. Just a few months ago, back in May, the stock was below $5. It was $4 and change. And then it shot up in their May earnings from about $5.90 up to, on June 6th, it was $9.65. So it can outperform on earnings in the past. I got the feeling the person buying these calls is probably leaning towards those again, but the low was $4.60 earlier this year, not that long ago. So this thing's had quite the banger move already. Do you want more Nov 9s? If that's the case, listeners, you can join the party out there today, trading them for a variety. Looks like around, what'd you say? Yeah, 12 cents, 13 cents in that range, 15 cents, listeners. If you like those, they're sitting there waiting for you. Speaking of things we like, I like a good ticker, Mr. Meatball, and just a good name in general. This is one I'm surprised. I'm surprised we have not come across this name before because it just speaks to everything we like in the space. This is Toast Inc., ticker symbol TOST. So Toast is their symbol. This is an all-in-one point-of-sale system for the Android operating system. So a very specific bit. Oh, this is restaurant software management for Android. So very specific. Hence the name, Toast. All right, I get what you're going for here, Toast. Trading $15.84, up about 7 cents today. Let's see, on the year, a year ago, Toast has kind of been all over the place. A year ago, it was $22. So they're off 6.25 on the year, nearly 30%. They got as low as, looks like about $15.50. But first, they crushed it to 16.75. That was on December 28th. Then they rallied it up to almost $26. That was on February 15th. Then they crushed it right back down again to $15.52. That was the low for the year, it seems like. Actually, no, the low might have come now. So the low back in March was about 16.25. Then they rallied it again to the high for the year, this time in July, of about $27 even. And then since then, it's been pretty much straight down, back to a new low that was set this morning of $15.52. So not a great day, not a great year for Toast Inc. And let's see, what did our Eye of Sauron find? It found some very near-dated puts, listeners. Somebody loading up on the Nov 15 puts, but these are expiring on the 10th. So these are in the weekly, so not even earnings. But you know what? Actually, I take it back because that is far enough to get you earnings. The earnings are on November 7th, so clearly that was part of their calculus. And again, one of the reasons the weeklies exist, allow you to hedge very specific event risk. So they bought 13,000 of these bad boys for 75 cents. That's a 102 vol, if you are intrigued. At the time, it was a 52-week low for Toast. It has since dipped lower. It's 15.77 at the time. So an interesting one. Mr. Meatball, I'm starting to like Toast. I just like the name. Might have to come back on our radar again. What are your thoughts on this palooza of puts in Toast?
Bearish. Very bearish. This was a sweeper, wanted to buy as much as they could in short order, all at one price. 15,000 of them. So not just some market maker looking to, or some stock jockey looking to make 20 cents. I think they're going for a big one here.
The big one indeed. Let's see if we can cap it off here with a big one. And the name we were just talking about, this is Ford. You know the ticker by now, ticker symbol F, listeners. You also know what kind of year it's been. I was just talking about it. The high was not quite $16, about $15.42. That was back in July of this year. The low, $9.68. Guess when that was? Oh, this morning. $9.82 right now for Ford. So, yeah, not looking bueno out there in Ford land. The last week has really been kind of rough for them, crushing down from $11.50 down to hit $9.68 this morning. Seems like, Mr. Meatball, somebody may be thinking this sell-off a little bit overdone. We also saw some very interesting paper on oddities, very long-term, looked like stock replacement type paper going out to, I believe, June of 2025. So it does seem like longer-term, some of the paper lean into the upside. But let's see what we found today. It looks like not quite as long-term as June of 2025, but in March of next year, it looks like they might be leaning the same way. Let's see. 4,693 of the March 10s going up this morning, listeners. Worth noting, Ford is going ex-div pretty soon, but these calls, you're not buying March 10s for the dividend. If you are, you're doing it wrong. But they went up about almost 5,000 times for 72 cents. There are going to be earnings, obviously, between now and March. The next announcement is on February 1st. So 72 cents for a little bit of upside. This also goes back to our poll from last week. How cheap is too cheap? With the stock $9.83, do you want to pay 72 cents for some calls expiring in March? This person clearly does. I'm curious about that, Mr. Meatball. What are your thoughts about these calls and also shelling out 72 cents on a stock that's below $10 to begin with?
Yeah, I always wonder about that. I mean, you're paying a lot of money for a stock that is, relatively inexpensive on some calls. I guess the theory is like, you're still getting some decent leverage, but relative to the cost of stock, it is a lot. But hey, if the stock's going to take off, they're going to be happy.
They're looking for a return to the old Rivian Ford days, mid 25. Should suit them very nicely out there. So yeah, listeners, are you down with all this upside paper we're seeing in Ford of late? Are you part of that palooza? Are you more inclined to buy the stock here? It might be a good question of the week, dovetailing off what we talked about last week. We shall see. But now it's time to see what Uncle Mike has up his sleeve. It is time for the strategy block.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the strategy block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the strategy block, the portion of the show where the uncleest of Mikes regales us with options, wit, and wisdom, and also lurid tales of one Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Mr. Uncle Mike, have at it, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, with Jim the Anvil Neidhart, I mean, it's he married into the Canadian family, and so there's a lot of benefit to that, apparently. So with Stu Hart training him, how can you argue with that? But what I want to talk about today would be the importance of having a routine with your trading and or investing. So with that, for example, a couple of things that I think are very important with how you're going to measure yourself. Now, personal routine that I have is that I make it a point to talk with my clients every January about their portfolios, about the trading that we're doing, about their overall risk, their objectives, their retirement plans, et cetera, annual reviews in January. And I do that for myself as well. And I think it's, and my family, of course, because my wife and kids are important too. But what I want to emphasize is the importance of having a locked in and set routine with what you're doing with your trading and or investing. How do you measure yourself? So in other words, are you doing well? Well, I would say that if you look at your most recent trade, whether it's good or bad, I think that that's just not a good idea to do because your scope is too narrow. Now, if you're looking back on how you have traded for the last 15 years, okay, it's fun to do at times, but let's be honest with ourselves. What was happening 15 years ago in a lot of areas really isn't very relevant today. For example, there was this new thing coming out called the iPhone. And the iPhone was going to replace the iPad. Could it actually do that? Or I'm sorry, the iPod. I'm dating myself even more, the iPod. And things don't happen quite the same way with which they did back at that point. So where I'm going with this is that I think it's important to evaluate how you're doing with your trading, your investing, your overall risks, objectives, whatever way you want to put it. I like doing that annually, personally. You can see, how did I do this year? Why did I do things this way this year? What are some things with which you can learn? Now, with that being said, does that mean that you should just forget about what you did back in the days of the iPod? No, not at all. I think it's important to keep trading journals. I think it's important to really have a good feel with what you did back then, because it's history, and that's how you can learn things. Once again, are things the same as they were back then? No. But I think it is important to learn from mistakes of the past. The other day on the Pro Q&A, Mark had asked me a question, and it got to something in reference to sequence of return risk. And so that's kind of a hot button issue with me, because I actually got hurt on that back in 2009. And so what sequence of return risk is when you actually are forced to sell a stock at a lower level that you wanted to hold for a longer period of time. And so at that stage in my career, I needed to sell some stocks to do a couple of things. And so in 2009, these were stocks that I was planning on holding for a longer period of time. However, in 2009, those stocks, like a lot of stocks, were down. And had I held on to them, they would have done well and they would have made a lot of money. But unfortunately, I couldn't at the time. And so during that time, I learned firsthand the problem with sequence of return risk. Those stocks came back shortly after I sold them. Once again, I didn't really have much of a choice. And so it was from that era and that lesson that I learned during that time of why sequence of return risk is something very important. So what is sequence of return risk, and how does it apply to my clients today? Well, one thing that I really try and do is that our clients that are in the distribution phase of their retirement, we try not to sell stocks on lows. So in other words, in 2022, for a lot of clients that had stocks or bonds for that matter, that were down in value, I did everything that I could to not sell them. And we took distributions from other areas. And then, of course, there's this cool thing called the covered call that helps with that as well. But when you're doing that, and you do sell stocks at lower levels, if you got to do it, you got to do it. But it's not something with which you want to do. It's like the old adage, you want to buy stocks when they're low, sell them when they're high, of course. But when you're in a position to where you need to constantly take distributions, that's something that can really burn you. Now, how does this get back to having an importance of learning and a routine? That's one lesson that I learned firsthand in 2009 that I've taken with me for many, many years for my clients when they are taking distributions from their retirement accounts, from just their general stocks, whatever the case may be, because I learned that and I lived it. And I don't want other people to make that mistake. So understand that if you are looking to evaluate your trading strategies, it's important to have a regular routine on how you measure them. For me, it's yearly, and I think that's pretty common with a lot of professional traders. It's also important to keep notes from years past. Is it relevant today of how is the iPhone going to replace the iPod? Of course, that's irrelevant. No one's going to even say that anymore. I don't even know if you can even get an iPod today, quite honestly. I'm sure Longo is probably Googling that right now just out of his own curiosity. But what is relevant is that the lesson that I learned firsthand on sequence of return risk is something that's very real. And that is my strategy block for today. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween indeed. Let's see if we have some spooks in store for us listeners, because it is time to go for a little bit of the old mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, listeners, let's get to the mail block. see what you folks have on the brain. Our question of the week this week just went live, so you're not going to have a chance to play along in this one, listeners. But it was along the lines of what we were just talking about. Remember, I said that was going to come back into play. Our discussion of Ford does dovetail on what we were talking about last week with cheap options. But we said quite simply, we've seen a lot of upside call activity in Ford lately, including the June 2025 935 calls, funky strikes there. They traded for about 2.25. Talked about those on Options Oddities on Friday, as well as, of course, these March 10s right now and a bunch of others. Does raise the question, Ford back below $10. Would you still buy calls in Ford, or you rather just buy the stock? Gave you three choices. Ford, upside calls for life. You're in it to win it. You prefer the stock below $10, or you prefer Tesla. We threw that one in there as well. A little bit of a fun Tesla. That's going to, of course, I think, drive some ire out. That just went live during the show, listeners. So get out there, add options. Make your voice heard. We'll reveal the results a little bit later in the week. Speaking of revealing the results, let's get to that now. Last week, you folks came out on our when is the stock too cheap to bother trading the options poll. What is your cutoff level? Below $10, which is where Ford is right now. 34.6% of you coming on. That's a pretty high cutoff. I was surprised by that. So fully a third of you will not trade any options on a stock when it's below 10. That kind of removes a lot of stocks from your arsenal. On the flip side, though, I could see it if you want to just keep things active and juicy. I see an argument for both sides. Check out our Options Bootcamp episode. How cheap is too cheap? For more details on that. There is no cutoff. You folks don't care. 30.8%. 26.9% coming in saying below $5. That's your cutoff. And the infamous other 7.7%. Our actual question of the week, that was more of like a flash poll around the Options Bootcamp show. Our actual question of the week last week was, we've got more data under our belts right now about zero DTE options. So quite simply, do zero DTE options increase volatility intraday volatility? That's important. Heck yes, heck no, or you still need more data. Heck yes, taking it, listeners, 63%. Heck no, 29.6%, and 7.4% of you in the Uncle Mike camp on the sideline saying you still need more data out there. Speaking of needing more data, our poll, like I said, just went live. Right now, 100% of you are saying you prefer the stock below $10. I have a feeling that's going to change in just a few minutes out there. But intriguing stuff. Make your voice heard over there. At Options on the old X is the place to go as we keep going around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block, the portion of the show where we break down what we're keeping an eye on for the rest of the week into the weekend. And let's start with the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Meatball. What are you keeping an eye on for the rest of the week until at least we can gather here together again with the Flow Master on Thursday, sir?
Whether this market gets follow through after today. We're up about 1.25%. VIX is below 20. Is this a bottom, or are we just getting kind of a one-day reprieve? This is a pretty nice bounce back for markets. So now the question is, are we going to see some love here for markets, or are we going to just are we going to get this one day Monday kind of rallies that we've seen and then right back to ugliness for the rest of the week?
Yeah, that's a good point. As we're coming into the end of the show here, listen, it does seem like the head fake we were seeing, we thought the fix was in, right back down below 41.5, and got down to about 41.39, and now they're rallying it again back up to around 41.66 or so. So S&P up about nearly 1.2% as we're coming into the end of the show. So intriguing stuff to be found out there, listeners. That means our VIX friends now back below the 20 handle, 1986. An interesting year, also an interesting level for VIX. Will we stay there? We shall see. UVIX back below 40.39. I could use a few more handles. Saw 5 handles already today. I could use a few more to the dark side before the end of the week in UVIX, and then I'll be a happy camper out there. Mr. Meatball, same question. Sorry, Mr. Meatball. Mr. Uncle Mike, same question for you, sir. What are you keeping an eye on until the Thursday show?
We got Apple earnings coming up, so getting geared up for that. I know it's after the market on Thursday, but still continuing to monitor Apple and see the activity in that during the week. Watching the 10-year note, seeing where 5% if that acts as a magnet in that area. And then, of course, just watching the S&P 500. 4,100 is a number, seeing where we're at with that. And after this week, I don't know if we have a ton of earnings left over, or any of the big names anyway. So continuing to monitor things.
Uncle Mike is Roz from Monsters, Inc. He's watching, always watching, listeners. Unfortunately, listeners, you can't really watch or listen to any more show for the old OB. But if you're patient, if you're on the on-demand side, you wait a little bit, you will be getting the crypto rundown coming to you on demand a little bit later today. We'll be joined by the Meatballs buddy, Mr. Greg Magadini from Amberdata now over there to break down all the data we talk about on that show during the week. Of course, if you're listening live on the pro side, don't have to wait long for that. That'll be in your ear holes coming up live in a little bit over there. Of course, you want to join the live partay. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro, the place to go to learn more. Looks like right now you folks are evenly split, roughly 50% each for upside calls for life and Ford, and you prefer the Ford stock below $10. So get out there at Options, make your voice heard. Mr. Meatball, where should folks go if they want more meatball goodness in their lives?
Go to optionpit.com. I'm putting out content every day to help you understand what's going on in the trading universe. Join me, optionpit.com.
I like it. The trading universe. Getting big, aiming high over there in the land of the pit. The entire universe at your disposal. Optionpit.com. Uncle Mike doesn't bring you the universe. He more brings you a slice of life from St. Charles. Hence the name, St. Charles Wealth. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, where should folks go if they want said slice of life?
Oh, well, come to stcharleswealth.com. If you can't make it to St. Charles, the town itself, come to stcharleswealth.com. If you are looking for a financial advisor who will give you a slice of life and a slice of option trading wisdom to perhaps fit with your overall financial portfolio.
There he is, stcharleswealth.com, the place to go to learn more. Got to get on out of here. Back again in a little bit for the crypto rundown. Spoiler alert, stuff's popping off in the land of good old Bitcoin, listeners. Some folks are already saying we're heading to the 40K land in good old Bitcoin after threatening being much lower than that not too long ago. Will that happen? What's going on from a vol and Skew and everything else perspective out there in Bitcoin? We're going to find out in a little bit. So if you're listening to this, subscribe to the full network. You'll get the crypto rundown on the on-demand side. Hopefully we'll see you in there on the pro. It's a fun time to be had. We got great pro Q&As coming back at you throughout the week, listeners. Of course, Options Oddities on Friday. And then our next episode of the one, the only Option Block coming at you on Thursday. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Option Block is brought to you by Tasty Trade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? Tasty Trade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. Tasty Trade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.